Hello, welcome to this video. We're going to tidy up ServerA a little bit. We've made ServerA a domain controller, so it's got Active Directory and DNS. We've joined ServerB to the domain and Windows 10 to the domain from the other subnet on switch 2. So what we're going to do now is install DHCP onto ServerA and also attach this printer and reattach our Windows 10 machine to switch 1 just to test to make sure that DHCP is still working and that Windows 10 can still get out to the internet. Okay, so that's our plan for today. We'll open up our virtual machines. So here I've got all 5 of them running, and I'm going to open up ServerA. It's already open. Okay, so what we need to do is set up DHCP. We're going to start up our server manager, and we're going to add roles and features. Next, and this is the server. Yep. So what we want is a DHCP server. So we're going to tick this box here and add any features and click next, and install. Okay, so then it's just a wait for it to install those features. And what would normally happen is we'd get a notification up here, which would be to set up the DHCP, but we'll also have in the tools directory a DHCP item, and we'd be able to manage it from that as well. So you can see DHCP just popped up over here, so it's now part of the dashboard, and it says that it's been successfully installed. So we can go close. We can see here's our notification, and we can complete the DHCP configuration or post-deployment. So we can do that. We can go over here, or we can go to the tool and go to DHCP and set it up within here. So if we have a look at this at the moment, we've got an IP version 4 and IP version 6. So obviously what we want to do is play with the IP version 4, and we could we could actually just right mouse click on here and go new scope and install the scope this way. So that's a more traditional way of doing it, just using the DHCP console. If we run it from the notifications, it'll run the DHCP wizard. So here's the configuration wizard, and so we'll just go next and specify the credentials to be used. It's the administrator account, so yep, that's okay. Commit. Okay, so it creates all the groups, and then it's going to authorize our DHCP server. Okay, so now we've finished off any of the additional like post-deployment type things. We can actually get rid of these things as well, and then normally under DHCP we can see that counters are started, and performance counters are started, so we can see that it's actually up. It just needs configuration now. So again, what we're going to do is we're going to go to the tools, go to the DHCP. Oops, for some reason that disappeared. There it is. I'll just expand that out a little bit. We're going to go to IP version 4, right mouse click and create the new scope, which runs a new scope wizard. And the name, you can call it anything you want. Subnet 10. So the start address is going to be 192.168. Oops, 68.10. And I'm just going to go from, say, 100 to 200. It's pretty obvious. 192.168.10.200. It's a /24 subnet. The subnet mask is correct, so we'll go next. This is exclusions, which we don't actually need, so I'm just going to go next. The lease time is 8 days. The lease time can be varied depending on your situation. Sometimes putting it down to every 24 hours is not a bad idea, because that means each day whoever's in renegotiates their IP address again. In our case, it's not going to be an issue, so we'll just 8 days is fine. Next. Yes, we do want to configure the DHCP options. So next. So we need to set what the default gateway is. Now, our default gateway is going to be, let's minimize this out of the road. So we're currently here, we're doing DHCP for things that are in this subnet. So obviously it's the 10 subnet. So if I attach my Windows 10 machine to switch 1, it's going to get an IP address from this DHCP, and its gateway will be the 10.1, or the way out through our router out to the internet. Okay, so back to ServerA. That's 192.168.10.1. We'll add that in onto the list and go next. And the server name, we could just type in ServerA, try and resolve it, and it resolves it back to 10.2, and we've added it onto the list. So that's a good thing. That sort of all links up together. We could also add in an additional DNS server just in case this server is actually down, to allow it to get out to the internet anyway. In our case, we're not going to do that. What we're going to do is leave it as 10.2, and our clients will only get out provided we've got a DNS server available. And what we're going to do is we're going to do a forwarder on the DNS on ServerA to point it out to the next DNS server. So we'll go next here. We're not using WINS. WINS is like pre-Windows 2000 style operating systems. So we'll just go next there. And yes, we want to activate the scope now and go finish. Okay, so we've got a scope here, and when we look at expand out the thing, then look at the scope options, we can see that we've got a routing entry, a DNS server entry, and a domain name entry. Now, there are additional things that can be put in here if we're doing things like booting from a network card. So if we're doing Pixie boots, then we would need to put additional things in here. So for the deployment type environment, we would probably change our DHCP server to include those things that are specific for Pixie booting. Now, also in the policies here, there's also a thing down here called filters, which allows, we can put an allow or a deny. So if I went like a new filter here, I could put the MAC address in and a description, and that would be an allowed MAC address that's allowed to get an IP address. So you can actually set up filters and put in a set of MAC addresses of the allowed devices on your network. And if somebody else tried to attach to your network whose MAC address wasn't in this allow list, they wouldn't be granted an IP address via our scope. So it's a handy way to do MAC filtering via DHCP. So that's there, and you can also obviously put a deny in as well. So if somebody's been trying to hack in, you can just deny them. they won't get an IP address. So all of that's under IP version 4. That's all we need. So file, exit. What we need to do is, what we should have done just then was actually check to make sure that everything's activated. So I'll just go back to DHCP again. We can see that it is authorized, because the only thing that's there now is unauthorized, which is good. And we'd probably see also that we've got a little green tick here as well, which is another indicator that our DHCP is working. Now the ACID proof for this obviously is to move our Windows 10 machine into switch 1 and test to make sure that it gets an IP address. So what we're going to do is go into the devices and onto the network, and where it's currently onto switch 2, we're going to put that back to switch 1. You'll notice down here our network cable disappeared and has come back again. So let's, instead of logging in locally, we need to actually log into the domain. So I'm just going to type in administrator. And you'll notice when you do that, because there's a local administrator account, it switches back to logging into the local machine. So we actually need to put in GWMP / on here to force it back into the domain. And on our passwords, just our usual password. Hang on, I just spelled that wrong. Okay, sign in. So that's logging into our domain as the administrator. And because it's a new account, it's got to create the new, profile. So that's what it's doing at the moment. It's a bit tedious in Windows 10 actually, creating a new profile. Okay, we're in. So if we run a CMD, what I'll do is I'll just right mouse click and go to the file location. It's still actually starting up in the background here. So I can send that to the desktop. Send to the desktop. And you can send other things to the desktop too if you really wanted. That way it's always there. I'm going to just change the font size on this so that we can see it a bit better. Boost it a bit. Okay. So let's do an IP config/all. And we can see that we've got an IP address of 10.100 with a default gateway of 10.1, and our DHCP server is actually 10.2, which is our server, and it also says that our DNS server is 10.2. Now, if I tried to ping www.google.com.au, it says that it's 172.217, so DNS has actually worked. That's because the DNS server is 10.2 and our DNS server has already got forwarders probably in it, but we're going to go and check it anyway just to make sure. So let's whiz back to our server, and if we open up our DNS, look at our forward lookup zone, Get Well Medical. Okay, so we can see now that we've got ServerA, Server B and Windows 10 in there, and we can see that its IP address has been adjusted as it logged in. It accesses the DNS server and changes the name and IP address in DNS so that all the other machines at the domain can find it as well. What we really want to do is right mouse click on ServerA and look at its properties, and then in the forwarders we can actually see that we have forwarders in here that says 47.1 and 104.12. Now when we set up our machine in the first place, we had those settings on our Ethernet card, So when we had a look at the properties, actually back out and go details, we had those sorts of things on our DNS card. Properties, IP version 4. At the moment it's currently pointed back to, it's got a loopback address. I would normally point that back to myself. It may switch it back to a loopback address at some point in the future anyway. 10.2. Now originally what we had was the other two addresses, DNS addresses on there, these two, and what it's done is it's taken, as we've turned this into a DNS server, it's taken those and put those in as forwarders and taken them off the network card. So if we didn't have DNS forwarders in, then we would have to actually edit this and put those entries in. So I could put in 104.14, which is another DNS server. So if I put in 172.25.104.14 and go OK, you can see that it's picking up that it's actually another server in the wwitlabs.local domain, whereas 12 was the one that we had, 14 is another one. So that's the way you can add a DNS forwarder to your network. It's just a matter of editing, adding it in. It'll also check what its fully qualified domain name is as well, attempt to find it. So there's a possibility that you may have to put those in manually, and that's quite fine. Okay, so that means that our Windows 10 machine is able to define things like google.com, which is a name, and allows it to convert back to its actual IP address. Now in this particular case, we can't actually ping through the TAFE network, so these things are, they'll time out, they don't get there. A traceroute will show you how far we can actually get, which would be up to the point where this thing actually enters from the Wollongong West IT Labs into the TAFE network, and that's where it stops. It stops us from pinging through the TAFE network and enumerating all their servers and waypoints and routers and things like that. So that's a safety thing from their point of view. Okay, so we know that our Windows 10 machine has got an IP address from the DHCP server that we set up on here. The other thing I'd like to do is to set up a printer. So I think if we go to Device Manager, no, probably not Device Manager, probably just printers. Can we go to so we go to Control Panel. I did press Control Panel. Doesn't want to work for some reason. Let's get out of all of this. Let's go to the Control Panel. Okay, there we've got it. I've got that changed to small icon so that we can see. And on here we've got, we should be able to find devices and printers. There it is. Okay, so currently we've got a just a standard thing. We're going to add a printer. And we've got a particular printer that we're going to connect this to via a standard TCP/IP connection. So it's not physically going to be connected to this server, it's just going to be connected via the network. And then we'll share this out to the remainder of the getwellmedicalpractice.com domain. So you can't find it, wasn't listed. So we're going to add it via a TCP address. Next. In our case, we've got a set IP address, so that's 172.25.104.22. We go next. Now you can see that it's picked up the printer and it's given us where it actually is located in FG47PRN. That's the name of the printer, and so we'll go OK on that. And we do want to share this. We could just leave it as the existing share name, or we could pick you know, a name that means something to the Get Well Medical practice. So we might change this to, you know, Get Well Medical Practice main printer or something like that. Okay, so we'll share it like that. And that means that other devices in our network can now print to that printer via the share. So if we just go back to our Windows 10 machine and if we go to the control panel and change our category to small icons and then look for devices and printers, it's probably the best way. And we can see that we don't currently have a real printer in there. We've got a PDF and a document writer and stuff like that. We're going to add a printer. And we'll see if it detects the network shared printer from ServerA. It's a good idea just to go to ServerA, and what we're going to do is exit back out, go to here. We're just going to go double backslash and then the name of the machine, ServerA, and we're going to see what shares are actually on this server. So we can see that our GWMP main printer is one of the shares, and we've also got the net logon and the sysvol, which are the standard domain-based shares that you would get. We haven't actually created any other directories yet and put shares on, but we will. I just wanted to show you that the printer is actually shared. So over on here, we can't see it at the moment, so the printer wasn't listed. We're going to find it based on a location, or we can just go like / computer name / printer name. So we could do it that way there. I was just wondering if we could find it in the Active Directory. So let's try that. Entire Active Directory. Let's do a find now. Let's do a star there. We'll go find now. Or we can do, okay, so we need to actually put it to the domain. Browse. Computers. Oh, sorry, it'd be domain controller, wouldn't it? It's not actually coming up at the moment. That's okay. So what we'll do is we'll exit out of that and we'll just go directly to it. So if we go / server a slash, and then we're going to go, they've got it actually shared via this, which is interesting. The name of it was called something else, the Get Well Medical main printer or something like that, but it still actually shared it under the actual name of the printer. So we'll do that and go next. Okay, so it knows that it's this printer on ServerA. Next. And if we print a test page, that will work. And I can hear it working, so that's quite fine. And finish. So here is our network printer that we can access via our Windows 10, which is in actual fact a printer that we connected via a direct TCP/IP connection to our server. It's hard to virtualize an actual printer, so we used an actual printer. We just connected to it via a TCP connection. Okay, so in this video what we've done is we have added DHCP to ServerA. We've also added a printer via a direct TCP/IP connection. We've moved our Windows 10 machine into switch 1 and seen that it got an IP address from the DHCP server. And we've also attached to the network shared printer off ServerA. So that completes this video at the moment.